Hello anime lovers, this is your captain, and today we will get to know the story of Gakusen Toshi, so if you like it, leave your thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. The anime begins with a masked boy and a girl facing each other in an intense sword fight. The girl prepares to deliver the final blow and advances towards the masked boy, but she is unable to defeat him and ends up on the ground gravely wounded while apologizing to someone named Ayato. In the past years, a catastrophe happened that destroyed many cities and caused the world to change drastically, resulting in the emergence of a new race of humans with special abilities called Genestealer. A boy named Ayato was walking when he saw a handkerchief falling from the sky. He hears a girl talking about a room that had the window open and jumps to get there. When he arrives, he sees something that leaves the girl embarrassed. He tries to explain himself, but she tells him to turn around so she could dress. When she is dressed, the girl named July asks him about the handkerchief he had mentioned. He gives it to her, and she becomes very happy and grateful since the handkerchief had a special value to her. However, July was not going to only thank him after he had seen her almost without clothes. July then begins to cast a spell, and Ayato feels an enormous pressure coming from her. She releases the attack, and he manages to escape in time, but July pursues him and says that he will pay with his life for entering the girls' dormitory. However, Ayato did not know this since he had been transferred recently, and he also did not know that the girl in front of him is number 5 in the ranking of the Saidoken Institute. July challenges him to a duel, but Ayato still did not have a sword, and one of the people who were around watching everything throws one to him. He then accepts the duel, and the winner would be the one who destroyed the other's emblem first. The duel begins, and July already fires some spears, but Ayato is skilled and manages to dodge. The people around begin to think that July was holding back, but she was not. Without wasting time, July launches a fireball, and Ayato moves forward, and July makes it explode. But with the Amagari style, he manages to escape unscathed and approaches July. He holds her and shouts for her to duck, then throws her to the ground, avoiding an unknown arrow that was about to hit her. He hadn't noticed, but he was touching Julie's breasts, which made her embarrassed. Then Claudia, the student council representative, appears and cancels their duel because Ayato had not yet completed the paperwork. The two of them chat, and Claudia admits to being a manipulator and shows off her abs, but it's just a joke. When they enter the classroom, Claudia explains to Ayato that the festival is an event to determine the best Genestealer between schools through fights. She asks him to participate to improve Saidoken's performance, saying she would do anything he wants. However, Ayato is not interested because he wants to find out about his sister. Claudia shows Ayato that there was a person named Haruka who had attended the same school 5 years ago. After 6 months, she left, and all her data was deleted. Claudia also shows Ayato an Ogolux, named Severesta, which is so powerful that it's feared by other Ogolux. Ayato sighs and says that his real reason for joining Saidoken was to find out what he should do. Suddenly, Claudia grabs Ayato and says she's grateful to have finally found him, but doesn't reveal anything else. Then we jump to when he's already in the classroom, and the teacher tells him to sit next to Julie. Ayato asks to be friends, but Julie is still angry with him, although she's also grateful for being saved. She says she owed him one. The guy behind Ayato introduces himself as Yabuki, and they will be roommates. While walking, Yabuki tells Ayato that July is the princess heiress of Lias Utania, and one of the few Strega among the Genestealer. Ayato returns the sword that Yabuki had lent him earlier, and he starts to become interested in Ayato. Then, they hear a guy named Lester, who is the 9th on the ranking, challenging July to a duel. July gets angry and unleashes part of her power, causing flames to appear around her. Ayato approaches, and Lester wants to fight him, but his companions stop him, and he leaves. Ayato asks July what she fights for, and she says it's for money, but she needs a partner for the Phoenix Festa, a doubles event, and she doesn't have any friends. Ayato asks July to show him around the school since she owes him a favor. Then, we see a flash of Ayato with his sister, where she says that their father forbade Ayato from fighting because he has enormous power that hurts not only others but also himself. The next day, Ayato greets July's, and everyone is surprised that she responded. Ayato meets Soya, his childhood friend, who came to the school to expose the weapon her father created and for other reasons she doesn't reveal yet. July's invites Ayato to see the school, and Soya says she'll take him herself to avoid a dispute. Claudia appears and jokes that she is the most qualified since she has been at the school the longest. In reality, she wants to inform Ayato that the compatibility test for his weapon will happen the next day. July shows Ayato around the school, and when they reach the center, Ayato goes to buy some drinks. Soya asks July about her fight with Ayato and says it would be impossible for her to have survived since they are probably on the same level. July challenges Soya to a duel, but before they start, they are attacked. July sees the enemy and attacks, and Soya shoots her weapon, causing a massive explosion. The strangers end up fleeing when Ayato returns and sees July and Soya with their private parts exposed. The next day, Claudia takes Ayato to the testing room where he ends up meeting Lester. In the test, a person can keep the requested lux if the compatibility is higher than 80%. Lester chooses Serverester, and when he holds it, Ayato feels something coming from it. During the test, Lester tries everything but ends up being rejected by the lux when the compatibility reaches negative levels. The lux turns to attack Ayato, but he dodges the attacks and eventually manages to restrain it on the ground. The compatibility shows 97%, and Ayato is able to obtain his lux weapon. On his day off, Ayato is with July, who is showing him around the city. Ayato compliments her and they walk around until they reach a hamburger shop. While eating, Ayato advises July not to walk around alone or engage in duels, as it could be dangerous. Lester suddenly appears and wants to fight July, but Ayato interrupts, warning that he could be mistaken for the attackers from the previous day. Lester leaves in anger. As Ayato and July are heading back, they come across two groups of thugs fighting, which turns out to be an ambush to capture July. She defeats them easily and interrogates one of them. They then follow a suspicious person, but are unaware of another enemy who attacks July. She manages to dodge the attack, and another thug shoots at Ayato, but he defends himself using his lux. The enemies flee, and July and Ayato leave the scene. At night, Ayato enters July's room through the window again. She asks him to undress, but he misunderstands and thinks she wants something else. She just wants to sew the clothes he tore earlier in the confusion. While she sews, Ayato sees a photo of July with her friends from the orphanage. She talks about her goals and how she went to school to earn money to support the orphanage, which is a special place for her. Ayato sees the handkerchief he gave her, and July says it's her treasure because each piece was embroidered by her friends from the orphanage. The next day, Ayato is worried about July because she left in the middle of class. He tells Claudia that she was reading a letter. Claudia says it was probably from the enemy she had faced. Ayato wonders if July doesn't trust him anymore, but Claudia says that's just her way of wanting to protect those who are important to her. Ayato runs off, and Claudia throws her lux. At that moment, he realizes what his sister had said, and he discovers what he needs to do. He needs to protect July. When he arrives, July is already being attacked, but she manages to defend herself. The unknown person reveals himself to be one of Lester's companions, Silas. He says he will avoid touching Ayato if July doesn't participate in the Phoenix party, but she refuses and decides to defeat him there and then. Suddenly, Lester appears after hearing everything. Silas says he will defeat both of them and blame Lester. Lester attacks, but his attack is stopped by Silas's companions, who are marionettes. Lester tries to attack them, but it's not enough. Silas releases 128 marionettes that surround July and Lester. July uses the power of her lux but is attacked consecutively by each of the marionettes. She is eventually hit, and the marionettes put her against the wall. When Silas is about to deliver the final blow, Ayato appears and saves her just in time. He takes July upstairs, and she asks why he risked his life. He replies that his purpose is to protect her, and she becomes embarrassed. Silas appears and uses his marionettes to attack them. Ayato holds July's in his arms and starts fighting. He releases his power and quickly defeats several marionettes and continues attacking them one by one until he discovers that Silas can only move a maximum of 6 at a time. After Ayato defeats all of them, Silas becomes desperate and reveals his largest marionette, which attacks Ayato intensely, but it's useless. Silas tries to flee, but July's uses her power to make Ayato fly, and they follow him. Ayato uses his Serveresta again and destroys the marionette Silas was standing on, causing him to fall to the ground where Claudia was. Suddenly, Ayato feels immense pain, and some chains start chaining him. He becomes unconscious, and we see a flashback where we discover that it was his sister who sealed his powers, creating a limiter to prevent him from using all of his power. Ayato wakes up and sees July's worried about him, and he realizes he was in her lap, which makes her embarrassed. He tells July's about his limiter and explains that his sister had the power of confinement, which allows him to use his powers for only a short time. July's asks why his sister would do such a thing, but even he didn't know the reason. They change the subject, and Ayato asks July's if she already has a partner for the Phoenix Festival and if he meets the requirements. She remembers that all he needs to do is stay by her side, and she blushes again, happily accepting and wishing that they will make a good team. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews of the best anime. A kiss from your captain, and until next time.